What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are going to be putting the finishing touches on the 2025 NFL Draft. We're going to give you guys our thoughts on the Steelers draft haul. Going to go through some grades. I know everybody loves draft grades. Some of our favorite classes just around the league. Some of our favorite player fits. Excited about where those prospects landed. It's definitely a bittersweet time as we kind of turn the page. But I'm excited to get on here, talk some ball with you guys. Nick, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great, man. I haven't really been able to talk about like my full thoughts on the Steelers draft and especially like other teams draft. So it's really good that we're going to be able to hash this out, just raw in terms of like, what we saw and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's always bittersweet to kind of turn the page, looking forward to the next class. But we wanted to get on here and kind of put a bow on, just like the culmination of the last like 4 or 5 months of work. Us watching these prospects. I'm just excited that we kind of know where all these guys are going to land. That's kind of one of the cool parts of it. But I'm excited about talking through the Steelers draft class as well. Got a lot of guys that I think we can provide some good insight on. So just before we get started, please make sure that you like, subscribe, drop us a comment. Would love to know your all's draft grades for the Steelers, some of your favorite player fits. As many of you guys saw, I dropped the Caleb Johnson film room on the channel within like 24 hours and 6,000 views. It got popped with a copyright claim. So I don't want to bore you guys with the details, but that's what me and several other like bigger content creators are dealing with at the moment. I'm going to explore different ways to get you all that type of stuff, but I just can't make any promises that it's going to be on like the public side of YouTube. Okay. So I'm sorry, but it is what it is. There's not really anything that I can do about it. So, but let's get started with it. Nick, I finalized my draft grade for Steelers now over the weekend. So I kind of first want your opinion on how you think Pittsburgh did.
So overall, I kind of thought it was a B draft grade. I thought it was on paper, it was the worst of the Omar Khan and like the Marcon and Andy Weidel era. And a lot
Mhm.
of that had to do with just like the day three picks. They weren't able, not having that second round pick. And I know some people will kind of come back to like Minka Fitzpatrick and how a lot
Mhm.
of people counted that as their first round pick back in 2019. I think there's a huge difference between Minka Fitzpatrick on a rookie deal versus signing DK Metcalf to that luxurious, like huge deal,
Yeah.
major cap hit, 27 years old. Like he's a player in his prime. It's there's a big difference between that. So for me, I thought
Yeah.
the fourth round pick was really important to make it an A grade, and I just didn't think they really did that. But the two guys that they took with their highest picks, they nailed it out of the park in terms of value, in terms of fit, scheme, everything that you could ask for in terms of what you would expect there.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I kind of wavered back and forth between like a B minus and a B over the course of like just watching a little bit more film on some of the guys I hadn't watched as much, mainly like YA Black, Dante Kent, Carson Bruner. Those guys, the later round picks, and just the another reason, but I bumped it up to a B after getting to some of the 2026 quarterback prospects, just mainly because I think that they're going to feel vindicated. I think that this time next year, when they go through the process, they didn't give up any of their draft capital in the 2026 draft class. I just think they're really well positioned to go get themselves a quarterback. Now, obviously, those draft picks and that draft capital doesn't mean anything if you don't nail the picks. If you don't get the quarterback right next time around, like all this is pretty much for naught, right? Because we've kind of seen without having the guy under center, you put a pretty hard ceiling or a hard cap on your franchise. But I did love what they did. First two picks, perfect value with Derek Harmon in round one. We talked about that being like a pretty good fit throughout the process. Getting another guy that I think I wouldn't necessarily call him like the Cam Hayward successor because I think that's a lofty bar to put on really anybody. But I do think that Harmon is going to be a good starter for a long time, and they desperately needed somebody to take a little bit of the load off of his shoulders. And then just to come back and get Caleb Johnson in the third round was just tremendous value. You and I kind of speculated
Yep.
back and forth that the scheme specificity of Johnson's game and just the depth of the running back class could potentially cause him to slide a little bit further than he should have. He was my 38th ranked player on the board. He had a true like second round grade. He was somebody that I was just really, really desperately wanting to get into Pittsburgh. So I'm excited that they were able to land him. I think he's an excellent scheme fit. I think he's really going to be able to hit the ground running in this type of offense. So the fact that the Steelers, even without a second round pick, were able to get, the 22nd and 38th player on my big board, it's pretty tremendous, especially considering the fact that they, didn't move around the board really at all until later in day three. And I think that when you're giving out draft grades, I never know how people do draft grades, to be honest with you, because I look at all these like graphics that people make about like people giving their opinions on classes around the league. Everybody and their mom has like a B plus, and I'm just like, I don't understand how everybody just gets a B plus. Like, what is the average grade? Is the average like not a C? And then I think the criteria can really range, but I do agree with you. I thought that they left some value on the board on day three, which we can kind of talk about in a second. But the first two picks were really the most important ones because, really on days 1 and 2 of the draft, you really got to make sure that you're coming away with starters, not just that, but like positive contributors. And I really think they did that with Harmon and Johnson.
Absolutely. Completely 100% agreed. The whole thing, like with me for Caleb Johnson just falling to that third pick, like
Mm-hmm.
we talked about that scheme fit, and even though he was such a scheme specific back, we saw like the potential ceiling in that type of scheme and how that
It
could
was
actually,
tremendous. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And the fact that he's there, the fact he doesn't even have to worry about pass protection, that's one of the biggest things that he has to like, that we had questions about, because there's just not a ton of reps of him in pass protection. But because
Yep.
they have Jalen Warren, who's so battle tested in that area, like you don't even have to worry. It's such a tremendous fit. It's one of my favorite picks of the entire draft, if
Yeah.
not my favorite.
Yeah, and you mentioned like just like the pass protection stuff, and I think I mentioned this when I got on here and did the recap. But you look at Caleb's just snapped to go off of. I mean, he had 38 pass blocking snaps in 2024. That's obviously extremely low. He had 8 the year prior and 16 as a freshman. So it's just like overall, you're dealing with 62 total reps of him pass protecting. So regardless of what you see on film, like there are some flashes of him. You know, being really good with his eyes, recognizing stunts, picking things up, and things like that. I think the biggest thing for me that I wanted to see from him in those limited reps, I just want to see a little bit more tenacity. And,
Yes.
backs on backers is going to probably beat that out of him. And just in general, I know the type of mentality that Jalen Warren brings to that facet of the game. And I'm excited to see like him kind of rub off on Caleb in that way. But, having a guy like Warren and even Kenny Gainwell is going to allow them to kind of bring him along slowly in terms of the third down usage. One thing that I kind of disagree with on than like most people is I acknowledge that the small sample size in the receiving game is a big impact, especially if you're going to take a back on day 1 or day 2. They got to be like 3 down type of players. And I understand that. I think Johnson can get there though. And the reason why I'm so bullish on that is just I really do think that his hands are pretty soft. I think they're really reliable. You look at like his
Yes.
targets, there's catches away from his frame, making difficult grabs, like going to the ground outside of his catch radius and things like that. So I'm really bullish on the pick. I'm interested to see what are your thoughts just before we kind of move on to the day 3 stuff. I want to get your thoughts on just Harmon in general. What type of player, because you were even a little bit more bullish on him than I was as a prospect, what type of player do you think he can be as a rookie? And then what kind of ceiling, potential like long-term outlook would you put on him as a player in Pittsburgh?
I think the floor with him is really solid in terms of like where
Agreed.
he is as a run defender, like the way he is able to use his length in that regard. I think as a pass rusher, I think there's a little bit of a misconception about him because he has such a high win rate. People think
Hmm.
he's more polished than he actually is. And that's what has me excited, because you see the flashes of like when he's actually utilizing his quickness to be able to cross face, and it's not all that consistent. And the fact that you have those flashes in terms of like, potentially like implementing more of a cross chop, cross swim, like all those types of like moves and stuff like that, you see something that can come there with time. I
Hmm.
also think the bend is still something that can be worked on. I think he tries to rip under consistently, but he ends up not flattening his path because he isn't softening that like edge enough. Like you see a lot with pass rushers where like they get taken up the arc, where sometimes like they just don't have like that runway to like get through that contact efficiently. I think
Hmm.
Harmon shows a bit of that, but I think he needs to learn how to like get the hands, more active in that regard before he's ripping, through the guards and the centers and stuff like that. So I'm
Yeah.
pretty bullish on the pick. I think the floor is solid, and I think the ceiling is higher than people want to admit. I mean, this is a guy that was a pure nose tackle at Michigan State, was playing in like the 330s. A lot of people didn't see him as that type of player, and he ends up going to Oregon, drops a ton of weight, shows that he can be a reliable pass rusher, even though there is a lot of rawness to his game in terms of like, setting up his moves. And I think the fact that Cam Hayward is a bull rush specialist, and I think Harmon's best attributes are going to come from pushing the pocket, is such a like great mentorship, like, team fit. So I feel really comfortable about this pick paying off in the short term and especially the long term.
Yeah, I mean, we see that pretty similarly. I think the thing that makes me more curious than anything on Harmon is just like what type of rusher is he going to want to be at the next level, like finding his best path forward. I think for me, his best path forward is probably going to be continuing to refine his hands because I do think he's got solid first step quickness, but I
Yes.
would be kind of surprised if he's able to kind of live like that as like this quick like knifing pass rusher. I don't think he's going to be able to do that at an ultra consistent level at the
He
next
needs
level.
that as a change up is what it
Yeah.
needs to be. It
Yeah.
doesn't need to be his go-to.
Agreed. And I don't know, like the power stuff is interesting because I think he gets often painted as like this like power rusher mainly because of the length. And I do think that he actually is like pretty strong in his upper body. That was something that I really noticed like in the run game. But he doesn't really know how to maximize it yet as a pass rusher. So
Yeah.
for me, like you talk about like some of the unrefined points of his game, that's what kind of gets me excited because he has this really bad habit of like when he comes off. So when he's in a 4-point stance, he comes off the ball really low and he can get into people's pads early because of the length and he can actually drive people backwards. His pad level does kind of swell a little bit towards the end, but that's really where he's able to generate his power the most. Now, when he's in a 3-point stance, that's when you see him be quicker in terms of like learning how to like knife into gaps and beat guys across face, get into his spot. But you can't like switch those up because then you'll just be giving away your tendencies to the offensive lineman.
Exactly.
So it's like, can you possibly combine that like into a 3-point stance? Like, can you get him to play lower off the ball in the 3-point stance, maintain the first step quickness, and then also like understand like how to use his hands better? I do think that there are really good flashes of him being able to locate people's elbows and like swat them away and get himself free. The thing that he does that kind of bothers me a little bit as like a power rusher is like he comes off the ball sometimes and he telegraphs when he's trying to go with power and he
Yes.
locks his arm out and he can't generate any push because it's like it's so counterproductive. He has a rep against I think it's Marcus and Bo from Purdue where they got matched up once and like he comes off the ball like stands straight up and he like extends his arm like that and then Bo literally just like he's a really skilled pass protector. He just doesn't have much of an anchor, but he just like swats his arm down and Harmon goes to the ground. And it's like that type of stuff at the next level is going to get more exposed. But I am bullish on like what that like there's a lot of potential there. I also like I'm interested to see what he shows up to camp looking like, to be honest with you. You mentioned the nose tackle stuff at Michigan State. When he got there, he was over 350 pounds. This is a guy that slimmed all the way down to 317 pounds. I actually thought at the combine, like during the on-field work, I actually thought he looked in pretty good shape, like better
Yeah.
shape than he looked like in pads. I'm just kind of curious on what they and he decides to do with his body because there is some weight that I think could be redistributed, maybe into muscle, maybe just like trimming down a little bit in general. But I'm just really I'm intrigued by all that. But yeah, I think Harmon's going to be a good starter. And somebody that can definitely contribute right away. I want to get into the day 3 stuff just because, I think it's important to talk about just the fit and the reasonings behind like a lot of these picks. But have you had the chance to look at like all of their day 3 guys like in
Yeah.
preparation for this?
I
Okay.
I didn't get to see Kent. That was the only one I didn't get to watch.
It's impossible to find film. I mean, I've seen 2 games. That's it. So it's been really tough. One of which was against New Hampshire in 2023. So that kind of tells you where I'm at. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've seen like 2 games and some other like clips and stuff that I've been able to find. But it's pretty tough. It's pretty tough out here. So let's start with what was your favorite pick of day 3 that they made?
I'd honestly say it was Will Howard in the 6th
Mm-hmm.
round, just because I thought that value, because a lot of people are saying like Will Howard could go in like the 3rd round. And I was just like, I don't know about this. I don't feel great
Mm-hmm.
about this. It's like a very Mason Rudolph-esque type of player, except
Yeah.
like, with more mobility. And the fact that he goes to the 6th round, I know a lot of fans are excited about him, and I'll get to that a little bit later. Will Howard is a really smart player, and I think that needs to get a lot of credit because
Hmm.
he does a lot of preparation in terms of like pre-snap management. Like he's making sure guys are lined up. He's checking the Mike linebacker consistently. There's always and like he's involved with like changing protections. Like he does that stuff, and that's really important. The thing that really gets me is this is a really smart player who has some absolutely boneheaded moments on tape that
Hmm.
bother me. And it has
Yeah.
to do a lot with reading leverage. I feel like because he is like, he'll look at something and he'll end up being late. And it's like he doubles down on it being a bad decision. Like the interception against Michigan, he is predetermining it before he even throws it. There's a play against Michigan State where like he's looking down Abuka the entire way. I believe it was on a sail route, and there's like a curl flat defender like right there, like in the picture. He's just looking right at him, and he ends up being late on the throw because he's looking at him because he's like thinking, "Oh, I can get it around him." No, he couldn't. It was
Yeah.
it ended up getting intercepted, and then there were a bunch of plays like that against Iowa where he's just fitting it into a leverage that just should not be like tested. And I thought, for me, that was my biggest hangup with Will Howard. I thought his for how smart he was, he made some absolutely boneheaded decisions in terms of
Yeah.
reading leverage, and I thought that didn't really add up. I do think if Aaron Rodgers ends up being there, that is something that he can hone into him, in terms of, fixing that post snap processing. I'm not necessarily bullish on Will Howard being like a starter at the next level, but in
Hmm.
terms of being like a journeyman backup, potentially like a, you know, like rotational starter every now and then, I think he very much can be that. I like his mindset. I like a lot about that pick. I don't I'm I'm not there with the fans. I understand they're excited, and I watched the entire, Gruden's QB camp because like I loved watching those back when he was at
Yeah.
ESPN.
I
It's always
watched
a
that
great
too. It was good stuff.
Yeah, yeah, it was always a great time. It was interesting because I watched Jackson Dart before the draft, and I was like, I don't think like I'm getting Trubisky vibes from this whole ordeal, and then like
Oh
I watched the
gosh.
Will Howard one afterwards, and it's like this is his second son. He's like so
Yeah.
excited to like talking ball with him because he understands like working progressions. He talks like a coach, but talking like a coach does not always mean you play like an
Yeah.
elite quarterback at the next level. So there's whiteboard smart, and then there's on field smart post
Yeah.
snap processing. That's what he needs to work on.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there is a lot to like with Howard. I agree with you on the value of it, just because like I had a late fourth round grade on him to get him at like
I did too.
183 or whatever they got him at was I thought was great value, especially for a team like this. That I mean, let's just be honest. Like the Steelers needed to take some sort of swing at quarterback, and
Yes.
not that I'm optimistic that he's necessarily the answer to their prayers at the quarterback position long term. I would be intrigued about seeing Howard play next year, even if it's for, a half dozen games or anything like that, because while that's not a great sample size and, maybe that's not even like fair to like all the work that Howard's put in to get himself in this position, that is more than like a lot of players that are 6th round picks ever get to prove themselves. And I do think that there is a path for him to get in playing time this year, just depending on like how the team's doing late in the season, everything like that. With
Mhm.
Howard, I mean, the size is awesome. I mean, the dude's just really, really well built. I think he's a pretty solid, like straight line athlete. Can scramble, do some things like that. I think the
Good
accuracy really,
rotational thrower as
yeah,
well. Like he
and like
moves
the
so well.
accuracy in the intermediate area is really where I feel like he shines. Like sail routes, like he throws some beautiful like benders, like cover two, like Tampa hole shots, things like that. Him and Abuka were just like automatic on that stuff. But I think like one of the reasons why I'm so bullish on like him being able to potentially play as a rookie, and like keep his head above water if everything around him is good, is just because I think he's got really good pocket habits.
Mhm.
Like he has a really good like feel for like backside pressure. He was one of the few quarterbacks in this class that like didn't just like drift aimlessly off their spot, like continue to backpedal, throw off their back foot consistently. The dude will climb the pocket and he'll throw like in congested platforms. And like that's what the NFL is. Like you're gonna have to make plays in the phone booth. The thing with Howard for me, and it's like really the big hang up that I think you'll know right away, I feel like in training camp whether like what this is going to look like at the NFL level is just whenever he was like forced to move off his spot and there was like interior pressure or, he was forced into like going into second, third read, stuff like that. He's just not like a creative, I'm going to find like a throwing lane type of passer. He's just a little bit robotical. Like there are sometimes, even though he's got good like straight line speed, he's can be a little heavy footed in the pocket and things like that. So I'm just kind of curious on like how he deals with pressure at the next level. I do think he's tough, but the pressure versus kept clean splits were pretty drastic in college, and it does help obviously when you're playing with that type of offense around you. And the Steelers offense I think is going to be improved this year. I'm optimistic about that. Where I talked a little bit about DK Metcalf, but getting Troy Fautanu back in the mix. Hopefully the running game's actually like somewhat efficient for the first time in ages. I would love to see that happen with Caleb Johnson, Jaylen Warren back there. But Howard is a guy that I think is going to definitely require a good ecosystem, which is true for really all rookies. I'm just not sure that he has.
Absolutely.
He's so talented that he's ever going to be able to be a guy that's going to, really uplift his surroundings. But we'll see. I think it was a good pick, especially for where they got him. If nothing else, like I kind of projected Howard to be like a high quality backup in the league. If you get a high quality backup in the league with a 6th round pick, that's fantastic. The dude's got plenty of experience. I'm excited about that. Do we want to get into our least favorite pick on day 3?
I think we both know. I think we all know which pick this is. But I want you to take the floor on this one. I'm actually really curious to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know, man. I've tried to come around on this pick. I've talked to people who were higher on Jack Sawyer than I was, like as a prospect, and I just haven't really been able to do it. I just think for me, it just comes down to like value of the player. I don't necessarily think that other people are going to be able to convince me to like change on my eval. I'm not necessarily looking for that. I'm just trying to make sense of like the direction. And really where I've landed is the Steelers just wanted to have like some type of reliability, and they wanted to shore up the depth at the edge position. Just listens to some of the quotes from like the coaching staff, and it's like, they were impressed by like how he set the edge well in the run game, like how he competes in the trenches, things like that. I think that that's like perfectly reasonable. Like you see that stuff on film, like he does, like he's a good gap control player. My issue at that at baseline is just that I think he's going to be such a limited pass rusher at the next level. I don't see like any of the athletic traits that are really necessary for him to be like a really impact player. He doesn't false step off the ball, but he's still not very explosive in terms of like first step quickness. He doesn't gain speed up the arc. He just cannot bend. I mean, that just Absolutely. Like there is no like gray area there. Like some guys bend better than others. Some guys can bend through contact, but can't, or some guys can bend, but not necessarily as well through contact. He just can't bend. I just think he's extremely tight in his lower half. He's got thin ankles. I'm just curious on like how he's going to win at the next level as a rusher, because it's one thing to say like, okay, like he's going to be the 4th edge rusher. He can come on early downs, give them a break. That's a 12 snap a game kind of role. And I think that that's pretty limited for a 4th round pick, especially when you don't have a second and you kind of had other needs that are like there's this easier pass to playing time for sure. I'm just curious on how he's going to win at the next level, because I do think he's pretty crafty with his hands. But when you can't threaten guys with speed up the arc, and you're not necessarily like a pure power guy, or you don't have like the stop-start quickness to be an inside threat, I'm just kind of curious on like what's going to be his approach other than just being like a high motor guy. And I think like the one thing too that I think that the pass rush stuff, we'll see how much that comes true into fruition. I'm just a big believer on traits, maybe more so than other people at the edge spot. I think the thing for me is like, if they were going for a bigger body, like run defender, there were other guys available even at that spot, at this position, that I would have like rather have. If they wanted a guy, like I know everybody's talking about like the Preston Smith acquisition last year, like Preston Smith was like a lot. I mean, he was just bigger, and he's like rushed over the B gap before. Like Sawyer's never really done those things. So it's difficult to project him to do that without the athletic traits. And just there's nothing on film that would make me think that he could do it. So if he was more than like I thought he was a really reliable run defender in college, and I think he has the potential to be like a really, really solid run defender in the NFL too. but he wasn't like so disruptive to where he was just like wrecking plays. Like I think the PFF draft guide, one of the stats I was looking up for him was just like the run stop rate. He was in the 28th percentile in run stop percentage. You know what I'm saying? It's like I think that there's something here. Like he's reliable. He does get like washed out of gas, which is good. But it's not like when you watch him on film, like even with his reputation, I never thought that, oh my God, this dude's just like wrecking the game as a run defender. You know what I'm saying? And I just,
Yeah, he
that's
wasn't
one of the
Michael
things.
Williams.
Yeah, that's just like one of the things I just like look at. It's like, I don't know, man. So that's just for me, value wise. I had a late fifth round grade. I already posted like all those kind of thoughts, but yeah, that's just kind of my thoughts on Sawyer. I don't necessarily think that it's like a terrible pick. I do think that Sawyer is a fine like fourth edge rusher. There were other options there, better players available at that spot that I'd like to see better.
Yeah, I was not a Jack Sawyer fan. I didn't really see a lot of like high-end traits like you said, like the athletic traits are something that's important to me. It's not necessarily just Ben, do you have first step quickness? Can you threaten speed to power consistently? I don't
Mm-hmm.
think there's but I think he's this guy who wins very late into the snap. A lot of his wins aren't very clean. It's a lot of high
Mm-hmm.
motor and that really bothers me in terms of like if you're taking a pass rusher, with a reasonably, I'd consider fourth round at this point like a reasonably high pick.
It's kind of difficult too because it's a double-edged sword. Like you want guys that play hard, right? And
Hmm.
that I think that Sawyer does play hard, especially like he keeps his feet moving against the rush. And there are some like late type of pressures, but at the same time, like the NFL is so much more timing and rhythm based than the college
Exactly.
game is. You can just look at like time to throws. Like there's guys that come out of college with like 3.3 time to throw, and it's like in the NFL, everything happens in 2.6, 2.7 seconds. So it's like it's completely different. And the tackles are just they're longer, they're more athletic, they're stronger. So it's just going to be really difficult. I think the one more thing about is the speed to power stuff. He plays with good pad level as a rusher. It's just he's so thin in his lower half. Like his
Exactly.
legs are so skinny. I
He's
don't know.
like James Pierce in that regard. Like, and
Yeah.
Pierce is like a power
Super
rusher,
hot
but
cut. Yeah,
for yeah, it's such a weird like build. Like he's got
it
those
is.
skinny ankles. He doesn't have like a like dense lower half.
Shorter arms.
Exactly, the shorter arms. That was another thing. Like you mentioned the run stops, like he's not going to be able to like one arm guys consistently and then make plays with the other. Like
Yeah.
that's why his run stop percentage is not like
And
all that.
he moved tight ends backwards. That was the one thing
Yeah,
I did like. Like he does control tight ends. Like he doesn't let guys like that like manhandle him. There was definitely times where he would jolt tight ends back into the backfield. And I like that. I want to see that in my edge rushers. You should take that personally if somebody tries to block you one on one with a tight end. But in terms of like offensive linemen, like he wasn't ragdolling offensive linemen the way that some of
exactly.
these other edge rushers in the class that were billed also as like good run defenders were. But continue. Didn't mean to cut you off.
No, no, no. You're all good. I mean, like that's the thing with Jack Sawyer. Like, and I talked to Nick Farabaugh from I believe it's Penn Live a bunch about this because they were looking at so many edge rushers throughout the draft process, and I was
Hmm.
so quizzical about that whole thing. And I guess the way their run defense fell apart at the end of the year had them looking at these bigger bodies, these hybrid types, like guys like Elijah Roberts, Shamar Stewart, Michael Williams, like guys who could slide into that five technique role, but also being able to play on the edge. And that's what made the Sawyer pick just so confusing because he's not that type of build in the
Yeah.
slightest. And I really thought they'd go with a guy like Roberts who actually
Well,
has like that
yeah,
speed to
Roberts.
power.
And the other thing with Roberts too is like he's rushed. Not only has he like reduced down and played like in like a 4-eye, but he's got actual pass rush reps where he's standing up over the guard. So
Yeah.
that's one of the things that we talked about for a while is like the Steelers have had three really gifted pass rushers in Herbig, Highsmith, and Watt. When they're all healthy, like how do you get them on the field on third downs? One of those guys have to be able to rush off the B gap. I mean, Herbig has like the really quick, like side to side quickness,
Yeah.
but like he's kind of small. So when you do reduce him down into the B gap, he's at a severe length disadvantage. And if like he doesn't win with quickness, he can kind of get held up a little bit to where he can't really get to the second surge stuff because he's not that type of rusher. With Highsmith and Watt, that's all they've done is playing a wide nine. That's all they do. So, like, if you
Mhm.
wanted to go get a different rusher, if they'd have taken Roberts there, I still think that would have been like, for me personally, just watching Roberts film, that'd have been a little bit early, but I could at least understand the vision. Like, okay, you want a
Yeah.
different type of body here. Roberts, I don't even know. He was like 285 pounds last year. I'm pretty sure. Like, someone I think recently tweeted that he was up to as much as like 290, and like obviously that's too heavy to be a defensive end or an
Yeah.
outside linebacker in this scheme. But if maybe the Steelers are just chasing what they maybe thought that they were getting into Marvin Leal, some type of like movable chess piece, because that pick hasn't worked out, they wanted to take another stab at an archetype like that. But yeah, to me, it's just really it's really confusing because he doesn't have like the traits that they typically look for at the position, and just kind of I'm trying to see the vision in terms of how they're going to use him, and I just wasn't able to get there. But that's a lot on Jack Sword. Did you want to talk real quick on YA Black? I'm just kind of curious, like what your thoughts on him were.
So for me, I just thought it was kind of like a body at nose tackle. Like he's a long guy who can kind of control the point of attack, but he doesn't. There's like no explosiveness off the line of scrimmage. I didn't really.
Oh yeah, he's so slow off the ball.
He is so lumbering off the line of scrimmage. But in terms of like the things with his game, like I just don't see a lot of pass rush. I see a lot like a guy who's just going to occupy space. And if you're talking like that 6th round pick, like that's fine. There's no one
Hmm.
really stand out in that area. So I don't hate that pick. I definitely think they want to, shore up their run defense any way they can and adding more bodies that they can trust, to be able to stop the run. Because like I said, they seem to be kind of scarred by that like end season stretch where they just got
Hmm.
gashed in run defense. So adding a guy like that who has that type of length, I definitely get that pick. I definitely understand where they were going with the direction of that pick, unlike the Sawyer pick.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is, you know, with YA, like his length, I mean, the dude's wingspan is just like freakish. I mean, it really is pretty crazy. There, like his tape is inconsistent. At least I watched about 4 games, and there is like an inconsistency to his game that kind of leaves me a little bit worried about what the floor could be at the next level, making that competition jump. But there's enough reps of him like playing on the opposing team's line of scrimmage that I just really appreciate. Like his ability to kind of lock guys out and lock peak shit, get his eyes in the backfield. I do think he does a good job like keeping his eyes on the ball carrier as well. You mentioned like the lack of like pass rush upside with him. I just I don't know what it would even look like because I think maybe you could convince yourself that maybe the long arm or like some type of like power would work with him, but really more than anything else, like he just has got to find a way to get off the ball quicker, and he's got to
Exactly.
find a way to get off the ball with better pad level. Like both of those are tremendous issues right now, rushing the passer. I will say, like, one of the things that did stick out to me in terms of like maybe being a little bit better than I anticipated going in. He's kind of a difficult dude to get a reach block on. Like even though he is slow off the ball, like I do feel like in run defense, he does move well enough laterally to where I feel like he's not going to get consistently hooked and gapped in that regard. I'm interested to see what like their deployment for him is going to be, just because you mentioned like he's got like a nose tackle-ish type build. Like he got up to 336. I'm not really sure what the reasoning for that was. I think he was listed around like 315, 320 at Iowa. So I'm not really sure what the plan for him is going to be. It sounds like it's at 3 tech, but like if he's a guy that has 3 tech nose tackle versatility and can play both spots for you as like your 5th or 6th guy in a rotation, I think that's pretty good value, especially if he is going to like he was like we talk about impact in the run game. He had 24 run stops last year. Like this was a really impactful like dude that was consistently making plays behind the line of scrimmage, at the line of scrimmage in the run game. So I do think there's enough there to get excited about, even if the pass rush stuff I don't think is ever really going to come with him, but we'll see. Um, do you want what do you want to talk about Bruner real quick before we get into some of our other like just real quick hitter like favorite class stuff?
Yeah. So Bruner for me, I actually watched him very early in the draft process because I figured the Steelers were going to
The
be
Steelers are
interested.
taking.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like just in terms they love they love the legacy picks, and
Yeah.
I the thing with Bruner, I actually really like this guy in coverage. I think he is incredibly smooth
There was
getting
some stuff in coverage I liked as well.
there's a play, and this was when Cam Ward was still at Washington State. I still remember this play where he's playing he was the pull runner in the Tampa 2, and he gets like depth all the way to the end zone from the red zone, and Ward has to fit it like perfectly all over
Mhm.
his outstretched shoulder. And I just like he's running with this receiver, and I think it may have been Kyle Williams at the time. And I just remember seeing this linebacker, and I'm like, that is such an impressive rep that I just don't understand why no one was talking about it, because like
Mhm.
Ward had to fit it in an impossible spot, and Bruner's running with this wide receiver. I was really impressed with that, but I also think he's just kind of like he's kind of frail in terms of like his build, so
Mhm.
he's not going to be able to effectively take on down blocks consistently. He's going to get kind of washed out in that regard. But if you're talking like range, being able to get those like outside runs, I think he can give you a little bit of that. I don't think he'll get reached as often, and I definitely think like in terms of coverage, he's a perfect type of backup to have for a
Yeah.
guy like, Peyton Wilson. And from what I've seen, like Bruner does have a special teams background. I didn't really go into those tape.
8 tackles 2022 and 2023.
You gotta like those. And
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah.
gonna make your mark early and make the roster, special teams is a perfect way to do it. And having a backup linebacker to Peyton Wilson who can actually cover, I did like this pick. I
Yep.
thought it was a good value
Yeah,
moving
it's like
forward.
perfectly fine. I know it's like kind of funny to joke about like some of the nepotism stuff, but like this is like perfectly fine for this type of player. Like I thought that Bruner, when I watched him, I only watched like one game before the draft, just because Dane Brugler mocked him to the Steelers. But I was like, yeah, this is like a fringe draftable guy. Like I wouldn't have a problem with them taking him in the 7th round. They ended up doing that, so I thought that was perfectly fine. And then like even going back and like watching a little bit more, like I do think that there is like maybe a little bit there in coverage. I think the change of direction, like agility stuff, is a little bit concerning. You mentioned like he's not like the strongest guy. I do think he squares up blockers, squares up running backs pretty well, but he's not like the strongest guy at the point of attack either. But again, like even on special teams alone, like I think it makes sense. The last thing before we go on to like just like real quick hitters on some of our favorite fits of player prospect landing spots. I do just want to like point out this because I've talked about this game in particular. Like we've mentioned it a bunch, like the loss to the Ravens and like how much that
Yeah.
really seems to have shaped like their draft strategy. And I do think it's a good like conversational point. And I do think the Steelers should have taken that very personally, because when you get punked out like that by a division rival, it should stay with you, right? I will say though, like we got to be very careful of the way that we are framing this conversation. Like picks like Jack Sawyer, picks like YA Black being like real difference makers in like this type of environment. Because like if you really look at it, like if we assume, like let's just say YA Black is Montravius Adams' replacement, right? Adams played 19 snaps in that game, 23% of the snaps. All right. Let's just say that YA Black, who like people have reminded me like 100 times on Twitter over the past week, that Jack Sawyer is like Jeremiah Moon's replacement. Jeremiah Moon played 6 snaps in that game. So like, yes, the Derek Harmon pick is the biggest one because that's the biggest investment that they made. And like, he's going to be on
Yes.
the field a lot more than these other guys. They've got to stop the run better. No doubt. There's no real reason that this team should have finished in the back half of the league in rushing EPA per play last year with all the talent that they've got. Having said that, their starters are the ones that are going to have to be better against the run because they're the ones that are going to be on the field primarily. So, the depth guys, it's good to where you're not going to be like, getting exposed with them on the field. But at the same time, there are some improvements that the first unit's going to have to make more than anything else. So let's real quick, let's wrap this thing up. Let's talk a little bit about give me like 1 or 2 draft classes that you like the most from just around the league.
I was kind of surprised about this one, Chicago, because Luther Burton and Colson Loveland were some of my highest graded players. And then
They got
even though
both.
they got both of them. And like, I think the Luther Burton pick might be the DJ Moore, like, hey, we saw the tape last year. It wasn't pretty. You need to step up the effort in terms of like not being lackadaisical on routes. So I like that. And, the Colson Loveland, the Sam Laporta, like, idea that like with Ben Johnson. I love that idea.
Super
Ozzy,
excited about that, man.
yeah, Ozzy Trapillo was actually an interesting one. I got to him late in the process, and I thought I
Good
kind
player.
of yeah, I thought I had him like appropriately graded. He ended up going in the 2nd round, and I was a little surprised about that. He was a guy that like looked really smooth in pass protection, but like whenever he was in the run game, he got a lot of movement like on down blocks and like reach blocks. I was really impressed with his ability. Shamar Turner was such an interesting player to watch because he has such picturesque, like almost textbook, like peak stack and shed, type
Mhm.
of reps. But then there are moments where he's just like out of the wrong gap, and then he ends up letting a 70-yard touchdown go by him. And I thought
Hmm.
like, the pass rush was a little bit like on the raw side in terms of playing from within the
Definitely.
interior. I didn't think he was consistent enough with his power, but in terms of like adding some interior bodies, I like that pick. I don't know anything about Ruben Hippolyte. I did not watch him, and I
Their
was like,
day three picks were interesting, but I thought the first couple were really good. Yeah.
yeah. Their day three pick, the one I was. This is what really put the draft class over for me. I am such a huge Kyle Monangai fan out of Rutgers, and the fact that DeAndre Swift is not a strong contact runner, and Monangai is, and he doesn't fumble, and he's really good in pass protection. I really think this is a 7th round pick that has a chance to potentially play way more than people expect. And I'm excited about that pick, and I really like what the Bears did in terms of value.
Heck yeah. Yeah, I love the Loveland fit, man. Like I really thought that him and Warren landed in the perfect spots for their respective
Yeah.
skill sets. And even like I was lower on Burton, but like I do see like the obvious talent there. And it's so funny because when we did the receivers episode, I compared Burton to DJ Moore for like good and bad reasons, and now they're
Yep.
on the same team. So yeah, that's gonna be an interesting one. I just like the approach of Chicago, like what they did to surround like the quarterback. I would have if there was one thing I would have liked to have seen Chicago do more of. I do think that they probably could have benefited from taking an edge rusher earlier, just because I thought the edge rush class was pretty deep. I would have liked to have seen them make more of an investment there, just because I still think they kind of need another guy opposite Montez Sweat. The other thing, speaking of like helping your young quarterbacks out, like my favorite, I think the best class of the weekend for me was the Patriots. Like,
Yeah.
and it's obviously easier for teams that pick in the top five to have like great classes like this, but I just top to bottom, man, I just thought that they did a really good job. I wouldn't have taken Will Campbell at 4. I think that transition to the NFL is going to be rough at tackle.
Hmm.
It's not what I would have done, but at the same time, like I don't think he's going to be a complete disaster either. But I love what they did to surround Drake May. Like Travion Henderson, a little bit early, but just I see the vision, like the best
No
pass protector.
fumbles.
Yeah,
And
the
with
best pass
Ramondre Stevenson.
protector. Yeah, and yeah, with Stevenson's ball security issues, I know that as a Ramondre Stevenson fantasy owner.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, just super strong in pass protection, and they're going to need it because that offensive line is still kind of like a work in progress. But Kyle Williams in the 3rd round, probably my favorite draft pick of any in the class. Like, I really think that dude's got a chance by the end of next season to be like their absolutely number one wide receiver. I really do believe that. I even like kind of like fooled around a little bit with Compa and Kyle Williams to Stephon Diggs, and it's kind of funny that they're both on the same team right now. But Jared Wilson, I thought that was like
I love that pick.
yeah,
I'm
just you need to be swinging for high upside guys. Like if you're a team like this that's picking at the top of the draft, and you've already used like the way the Patriots attack free agency. Some of the moves they made, I thought they overpaid for like baseline starters or competent players. But that's what you do. Like that if you're in a position like this with cash space and all this draft capital, if you got to
and a
overpay
rookie
for
quarterback.
competency and then make the swings in the draft for high upside plays, I completely understand that. Like, I think that there is a world in which Jared Wilson works out and is a really dynamic center with his movement ability. And even on day 3, like, I thought they just crushed it. Like, Josh Farmer, again, high upside swing. Is the tape consistent? No, but it's hard to teach like 35-inch arms and some of the stuff that he can do like 2 or 3 times per game. Braden Swinson, I don't know what the character stuff is. I can't speak to it. It sounds like he didn't get along with a lot of coaches, maybe
Mhm.
didn't do so well in the interviews, but that dude can freaking play. 1-year
Yes,
wonder
he
or not in
can.
the SEC, like 60 pressures, really high motor, a good athlete. Putting him with Vrabel, man, and like that's another spot. That's a premium position, something that the Patriots needed. So I thought they did a tremendous job, kind of filling out their roster. Now it's tough because that roster last year was like they had a lot of non-rosterable players, not just on the roster, but getting playing time. So they're
Yes.
still going to be a year or two away, I think. But I do think this is a good step in the right direction. And as someone that's been pretty critical of Mike Vrabel in the past from a team building perspective, I do think that he is a good floor raiser as a coach. I
Yeah.
was skeptical about how this would look as a team builder. I'm feeling better about that now in terms of their future.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about you talk about that draft. I mean, they knocked it out like through the entire like fourth to fifth round, like getting
Hmm.
Swinson, Farmore. I love Jared Wilson personally. I think that is like my favorite set, like one of my favorite centers. Like because I watched him very early, and I just could not believe the movement ability with him. He looks like a completely different athlete, and just the fact that he gets to
Hmm.
play, on that Mike Vrabel team and be coached up. I'm really excited about that. And I've mentioned it before. I don't think Henderson needs to be a 1A back. I think he needs to like also have like a guy who can take the edge off of him.
Yeah,
And with Ramondre Stevenson, I
it's a
like that.
great pairing.
Yep. Also, shout out to the Rams for getting that first round pick for next year from the Atlanta Falcons,
Oh
and
god.
and then taking my guy Terrence Ferguson with the second round pick because
Yeah.
man, I I love
The
those 2 moves.
the fact that Terry Fontenot is still the general manager of an NFL team, like, don't ever give up on your dreams, folks, because anything is possible. Like, has done a historically bad job. It is just hilarious. Um, the other thing, especially because that's going to end up affecting the Steelers too, because now that they're going to have 2 second round picks next year, they're going to be in the market for a quarterback, probably with
Yep.
Stafford, nearing the end. So, thanks a lot, Atlanta. We appreciate you. But yeah,
Growler to the Rams.
yeah. The other like class I want to briefly mention, just the Seahawks. I thought that the Seahawks kind of like in the draft, they had a ton of capital, so they had a lot of dart throws, but I just thought they really did a good job finding a combination of like guys that can play, so like low, like high floor guys, and also like some swings for the fences mixed in there. And when you're a team that's kind of like in the NFL, like the middle class, I think that that's a solid approach to take. I really like Gray Zabel. I think he was a good player. I really want to see him at center. Sounds like they might play him at guard, which does kind of bum me out a little bit because I think he should be their center. But I was lower on Emanwari throughout the process. But if anybody can get the most out of him, it's going to be Mike Macdonald. So
Yeah,
I will acknowledge that Mike Macdonald is a smarter person than I am for sure. Elijah Arroyo, I think that he's just Noah Fant plus. Like, I just think he's a better version of what Noah Fant like is or has been for them. So I liked that. The Jalen Milroe flyer late in the third round,
that's one of my
awesome.
favorite fits.
Awesome. He's going to be able to sit, develop. It sounds like they've got a good plan in place for him. They're working with the VR stuff, which is what Jaden Daniels used in Washington last year. Who knows
Yep.
if it works, if it doesn't, but it's very low risk. You can put in some package plays for him, and you don't feel the necessary pressure to play him right away with Sam Darnold there. And then on day 3, I just thought they hit it out the park, man.
Absolutely.
Torrey Horton, great value. I think he's going to be a very quality like wide receiver 3, one of the best zone beaters, good hands. And then Damian Martinez, it sounds like there was some stuff, character stuff, maybe interview stuff that didn't go so well with him throughout the process from what I gather. But the 7th round, just absolutely absurd. Like, they can feel good if they do have to trade Kenneth Walker for whatever reason. They can feel good about having
Or
to
if you
plug
trade Charbonnet.
Martinez in there. Yeah. And then Ricky White, play special teams, blocked 4 punts last
Yep.
year. So it's just like everything they did for the most part made sense to me from a floor and from a ceiling perspective.
Yep.
You got anything else you want to shout out before we get out of here?
I just want to say, in terms of like a draft fit, I really liked Tetero McMillan with the Carolina Panthers. I didn't have a first round grade on T Mac, but I
Yep.
like the fit with Bryce Young so much because if you watch the tape of T Mac and Noah Favita, there are so many like second chance, like like a lot of scramble plays, improvisation, and he just had such a sixth sense of knowing where to go, finding those
Mm-hmm.
holes, working back to the ball. And I just think that's going to work so well with Bryce Young, who needs, that type of guy to know he's on the right page with. So I'm really happy about that selection.
Yeah. I think that was a good one. I mean, selfishly, like speaking of like early picks that I'm just really excited to see how it looks on film. Travis Hunter,
Yes,
Jaguars. Oh my gosh, I'm still holding on to my Trevor Lawrence shares, and
same.
this might be what we need, boys. But I just imagine an offense with Liam Cohen. What Cohen did last year with the Bucks, like taking them to a completely different level with that offense. Finding ways to move the ball without Chris Godwin after that injury, being so open minded, and how he was tweaking their schemes and like completely changing their rushing attack from a conceptual standpoint. And then you're going to give him control of an offense that's going to have Trevor Lawrence, Brian Thomas Jr., who was phenomenal as a rookie, and then Travis Hunter. And then, oh yeah, we're gonna also involve Bashal Tootin. Like you got
Yeah.
a 4-3 back. Like it's gonna be really exciting. I am skeptical on the Jags offensive line, as I always am. But
Same.
I do think that there's a lot to be excited about if you're a Jags fan for the first time in probably quite a while. I know they've kind of bungled the early portion of the Trevor Lawrence experience, and he hasn't really taken the necessary steps either. But I'm optimistic. If he can't do it with this group, with Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter, the breakout's just probably not coming. And that will be really unfortunate, but I'm really optimistic. I think it's going to be incredibly difficult to defend those two guys when they're on the same field, just because the combination of size with Brian Thomas, the speed he brings, and also just like how electric Hunter is with the ball in his hands. And I'm just, oh my gosh, I can't wait. I just can't wait to see what it looks like. Because like I said, when we talked about Hunter and the wide receiver stuff, I do think that there is a chance that, he kind of revolutionizes, the position at the just the way that he's going to play both ways. Sounds like they're open to him doing that. So I'm excited to see what it looks like at the next level. So as always, we really appreciate the support, guys. Make sure you follow Nick on Twitter. All the links and stuff to my work, and I'll link his Twitter in the description of this video as well. Just on your way out, please make sure that you like, subscribe, drop us a comment, all that stuff. And I will be back sometime soon, hopefully in the next week or so, with some more content for you guys. So I'll holler at y'all next time. Peace.